I think in order to succeed, you have to work with people. And if you can figure out the key of A, your own self and the relationship with yourself, and then B, the relationship with other people, then there's no limit to where you can go.
Today I got my friend Addy joining my What's in for Fashion interview. Addy, he is a doctor, but on the side he's also a movie producer. Quick introduction of your life and your profession.
Sure. Should we start from the beginning?
Yeah.
So I was born here in the UK. I come from Pakistani heritage roots, and at the age of 1 I moved to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. My dad had a job there. We went to this sort of British American school. We lived in compounds. It was a very Americanized upbringing. I moved to the UK at the age of 11, which I struggled with initially. The main thing I struggled with was the winters and how cold they were. And my dad put me in a private school where you basically wear like shorts and socks all winter round, and I struggled. At the age of 18, you know, I did well in school, and I came from a South Asian background, so of course I became a doctor. I think it wasn't so much a coercion from my parents. It was more, yeah, you should be a doctor, you should. My real passion was mathematics. I excelled in it, and I was entering national competitions, and I loved it. But I went down the medical route, and I got a place at University College London. So you do your first few years, which is quite theoretical, in the university kind of lectures. And then the last 2-3 years, you end up getting placements in the hospital and all that kind of stuff. And then I found myself as a qualified doctor at the age of 24. When you qualify as a doctor, you then have to do 2 years of basic training. I ended up in Yorkshire. And as a doctor, when you're in a big city, you're probably more supported. But in a what we call district general hospitals, which are basically the hospitals in the middle of nowhere, you're suddenly in charge of like a lot of sick patients, and you don't have a lot of support. So at the age of 24, I was making life and death situations and decisions, and probably was a bit underprepared for that. And I did my training, came back to London. I've been in London pretty much for the last 10 years on and off. So you do a mixture of rotations, and you get like a sort of broad range of skills, and then you specialize afterwards. And I knew early on I wanted to be what we call a medical doctor. So what that means is I didn't want to be a surgeon. I think surgery, you have to be a particular type of person to want to do surgery.
What kind of person?
I think you need an ego. I think, you know, it's a very technical thing, and if your passion is doing this, then fine. Whereas for me, what I found interesting about medicine was the interaction with the patient, the bedside scenario. And I like working in a team. The specialty that I'm now doing, and the specialty that I decided to do early on, is called acute medicine. When you come to A&E with a problem, we're like the admissions ward. Review you, figure out what your diagnosis is, triage, so figure out, are you sick enough to come into hospital, can we send you home? If you come into hospital, are you really, really sick that I need to get the intensive care doctors involved?
Right.
If you come in with chest pain, is this chest pain coming from the heart? Is it coming from the lungs? When you come out of medical school, you have another 7 or 8 years until you qualify as a consultant, which is like the end point. And about halfway through, there's a set of exams you have to do. There's a practical exam. You have a simulated scenario where you're treating fake patients, and you're getting observed. But like a driving test, the more experienced you become, the harder it is to pass, right? Because you figured out your own way of doing things, but you go back to do the test, and it's like you have to do certain things, right? So I kept failing it ultimately, and I did this exam 6 times, which ended up putting a lot of stress on myself. And it got to the point where my junior colleagues were passing the exam and moving forward with a career, and I couldn't. It was a real turning point for me in terms of like, something needs to change. So I took a career break. I said to myself, right, I'm done. I'm going to take 6 months off. I had some savings, and I said to myself, I'm just not going to work at all. So for 3 months I did nothing, and then I woke up one day, and I remember I had this dream. Like, I just had this really vivid dream, which I don't even remember what it was. But I remember, like, I hadn't been dreaming for a few years now. I think when you're under a lot of pressure and stress, you don't really allow yourself to kind of process things. So after a few months off, I woke up and I had this really vivid dream. I wrote down what the dream was, and then I thought this would be a great idea for a film. And then what I realized over the coming weeks was I was dreaming more and more, and I was writing down my dreams, and then I was writing down ideas for films. And then I was like, you know what? I want to make a film. I'm going to do it. If I just make one film, a short film, done. And that's it. So I just basically started hanging out with filmmakers. So there's a website called Meetup. So I just typed in London filmmakers. I just started going to these random events. Some events would have like 20, 30 people. Some would have 3 people in a cafe. It was all very odd. And I was like, am I really doing this? I'm a 8-year-old doctor who has a job and a career, and I'm now just in some cafe with 3 middle-aged men talking about films. But I think you have to, when you immerse yourself into a sort of new world, or you're starting out, I think you have to have this kind of open mind of like meeting people, just spending a bit of time getting to know what the system is, right? So what is the process of making a film? I had no idea. The more conversations you have, the more you network, the more you kind of figure out a general sense of what's going on. Because I went thinking I'm going to be a director, like everyone. And I quickly realized actually being a director is such a specific skill that takes a long time to hone. Whereas as a producer, your job is essentially to make things happen, right? You find the stories, you connect people together, you build a team, and then you find a way to make the film work. And a lot of it, I realized, was like people skills. So communication skills, managing people, bringing things together, and all these things I was naturally doing as a doctor, right? You do in our day-to-day job. So I didn't realize that actually there were so many transferable skills. So yeah, I was hanging out with filmmakers, and then I started hanging out on film sets and basically making cups of tea, holding a microphone, all these kind of random jobs. And then I was like, okay, I got a little bit of savings and I'm going to make my own film, and I'm not going to be a director, but maybe I'll try out this producing thing. What I wanted to do was to use my medical background in the film industry. So rather than just being a filmmaker making, you know, classic drama thriller film, which everyone's doing, I said, well, I'm a doctor and I've got these ideas, and maybe there's something there, maybe there's a way of combining the two. I kind of knew I needed like a vehicle to have a bit of a platform for my first film, which is essentially in business terms my minimum viable product, right? It's like my trial test. And the NHS's 70th birthday was coming up, which is like a big event. I came up with the idea of a character called Nora, who is also turning 70, and basically her life personifies the NHS. So she's getting a bit old, she's getting a bit frail, she needs a bit of support. She has this big family who are trying to support her, which kind of represents like the NHS staff. And they want to move her to a private nursing home, which is kind of representing the privatisation of the NHS. So I basically took all the wider issues of the NHS and honed it down to like one person and one family. Because ultimately we relate to stories as people. We don't relate to numbers and facts and figures. You know, a story will always trump that. I just wrote down some ideas, a couple of pages, and then I went to one of these events and I met a director from Los Angeles who just moved to the UK. So his name is Dustin Murphy. He's a fabulous writer and director. He helped me with the script, and then we reached out online to people who want to come and operate cameras, actors, all these kind of things, built a team. I self-funded it because I just knew that was the quickest way of getting it made, because I knew I needed to make something. We made it, and we premiered at the BFI IMAX. We got into like dozens of film festivals. We won 20 awards over a year all over the world. We did pretty good for a first short film.
Well done.
Thank you. So then from there we made our second short film together. We collaborated, which also did well. And then I started getting into this, so the writing side of things. So I'm currently writing a TV pilot, which is sort of like a dark comedy with a, based on healthcare. So just using my kind of healthcare space in a completely new industry. And then now since then I'm making feature films. So I think as a filmmaker, feature films is kind of like the kind of real platform.
What is a feature film?
So a feature film is, so technically a feature film is a film that's longer than an hour. It's a film that you can sell. And the reach of a feature film is a lot more global. So I've made 2 features this year. One we are completing next week in terms of the editing process, and one we just finished filming and we're now editing. And they're both very different films, but it's very exciting. And like, not to sort of come across as a bit arrogant, but I've made more progress as a film producer than so many film producers that I've spoken to. And I think a big part of it was because I came from a medical background and I used my skills in that sector, in this sector. You know, I've never been to film school. I did a one-day producer's course once, which I don't think was particularly useful. I think you just sometimes have to be a bit entrepreneurial about it, just get out there and do it. Instead of talking about something, just get there and start doing it. You know, I didn't sort of go straight to a feature film. I had to make a few short films. I had to self-fund a few things. There's been a lot of rejections. There's been a lot of grants that I haven't received. A lot of stories that I have written that haven't been made. If you keep going, something will give. And I think a big part of it is having good people around you. So I often collaborate with filmmakers who I now class as friends. And I think it's a tough business, like many industries. And I think if you're doing it with people who you enjoy working with, then it makes it a lot easier.
Good people, as in they're good at their jobs, or as in they're more supportive of what you're doing?
Bit of both. I would say 60% people you enjoy working with and 40% technical. So as a doctor, a question I guess for you might be, would you rather have a doctor who's good at his job but is a complete asshole, who doesn't listen to you, who doesn't listen to your concerns and fears, who dismisses your family when they ask questions, who is unavailable to talk? Or would you rather a doctor who is, you know, does their job well, they're maybe not world renowned, but they are attentive, they're listening, they understand what you're going through, all that kind of stuff? I mean, which one would you prefer, if you're?
This kind of made me relate to a business scenario, which I spoke to a leader in our business, and I was basically asking her, do you rather someone great at their work but they don't have a good attitude, or someone who perhaps at this moment know a bit less than a formal one, but have inquisitive attitude and willing to learn? She said definitely the latter. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think people really underestimate the importance of teamwork, morale. So if you think of hospitals, for example, yeah, you need like a certain level of funding, and you need some, you know, academic people and equipment and all those kind of things. I think those are the basic structures. But what really then separates the difference is where there's like a good culture there, there's good leadership, people are happy working there. You go into any hospital ward and you speak to any member of staff and they're like, yeah, I like working here. You know, it's kind of like the vibe, you know, it's hard to measure those things, but you know when it's there. And it's the same in the film industry. You know, I've made 2 feature films. I think they're both pretty good. I did not have a huge budget. I did not have a lot of experience, but I had good people around me. And we all worked together. We all gave it 150%. We all bounced around ideas. It was very collaborative. And I think ultimately that led to a much sort of better film on screen. Of course, you need a good actor, you need a good camera and all these things. But I think the extra bit is often something we underestimate in a lot of industries. And I think it's super important, because somebody with a bad attitude who happens to have a BAFTA, you know, I've been in this situation before, and it's like a bad apple. It really spreads throughout the sort of film crew and production. And the same in hospitals, unfortunately, especially in London, you get a lot of you know, consultants and senior members of healthcare staff who happen to, you know, win an award for something, or they're known for something in particular, and so the hospital hires them. But what they don't realise is the negative impact of their bad attitude on staff, on morale. You know, you walk into a restaurant or you walk into a bar and there's just like a vibe, you just know, and it's hard to kind of quantify what that is. But if you do quantify it, it's because the manager of that bar is open and collaborative with their staff and looks after their staff. It's because the type of people who go there are people who are a bit more open-minded and maybe they sort of do their own thing. They're not sort of, you know, a rowdy crowd, which ultimately lead to a better success.
Being a doctor really helped you be a better producer? Like, what aspect of doctor makes you being a successful producer?
So, I mentioned I do acute medicine, so you treat a whole broad range of patients. So I can have, you know, an 18-year-old who comes in with a drug overdose, or I can have an 80-year-old who comes in with a pneumonia, who's, you know, reaching the later stages of life. My job is to kind of have a broad idea of what's wrong with you. Can I fix this, or do I need to send this to a specialty? it's really important for you to have good interaction one-to-one with the patient, but also have a bit of a more broader view of what's going on and where things need to go. And it's basically your job as a film producer. You are looking for stories and you're bringing together a team in the right way in order to kind of tell that story. You're problem solving, so you don't have funding here, where can we find that money? And if we get this money, is this money going to come with certain terms and conditions that's going to influence the story? If it does influence the story, is the writer going to be happy? If this writer and director come together, are they going to be able to collaborate? Your specialism is being a generalist, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of people, they just want to do one thing, right? They want to be a film director and they only want to do that, or they want to be a neurosurgeon, they only want to do brain cancer operations. And that's great, but then you need people like me, which often we're under-recognized. People who are just doing a bit of everything and keeping it together. Because people often don't know what acute medicine is, but every hospital has acute medicine. We are the backbone of every hospital. In the same way, people don't understand what film producers are, but we are the backbone of every film production. And I think with patients, you kind of have to, because there's two different approaches to healthcare. One is you tell people what to do, and I think that's the old model. So back in the day, we would just say, yeah, you need to lose weight, you need to take these medications. And now the kind of new modern model is all about what we call patient activation, give them the resources they may need or pointing them in the right direction. But it's very much more of an equal partnership now. So yes, I'm the doctor and I can sort of help you. And also I want you to feel empowered that you can also make decisions for yourself. You can figure out what the best route is for you. This may be a moment where I can mention the improvisation side of things. But as you know, I do comedy, improvisation, performing. I've been doing it for about 4 years. And I think one of the most useful things I've done as a doctor, as a filmmaker, and in life is comedy improvisation. And you know a bit about it, but for your audience, I can tell you that improvisation is when you basically go on stage and perform, and there's no script, there's no preconceived idea of what you're going to perform. It's not about being funny. It's about getting on stage, being very present in the moment, and working collaboratively with your colleague, working off each other, right? So if you say something, I work on that. I say something, you react to that, and we're kind of working together to an outcome that none of us know what the outcome is going to be. But that uncertainty is something that we embrace together because we're supporting each other. And if it happens to be funny, that's a byproduct. And often, the more authentic you are, the more funny it ends up being. And I think the same way when you're having a consult with a patient, it's not about, I need to get you to do this. It's a case of, this is what I think, and this is what I think you need to get to. And then the patient will respond by saying, actually, this is what I think. And together you get to an outcome, which may not be where you both thought it was heading. But as long as you're working collaboratively and listening to each other, you have a much more successful consultation. That's the sort of thing that I try and do now with all of my interactions. It's in life as well when it comes to sort of, you know, relationships or meetings or interviews. If you get rid of this idea of this is where things need to go, it's a lot more freeing. And actually, so one of the rules of negotiation is a negotiation is not about you, it's about the other person. So make it about the other person. What do they want? What do they feel? Where do they want things to go? And if they do the same for you, you both will end up succeeding and getting to where you want to go.
That's why I like the improvisation kind of interview.
We're talking about improvising, yeah.
Yeah, because you just never know where the conversation leads, and since you don't have a script, it can lead to anything, and together you make something even better than what you thought you were talking about.
It's improv, yeah.
But it's very interesting that you were saying improv is not for funny, because each time I went to the improv you guys did, I found it very funny.
People love authenticity and also relatability. We may say things that the audience connect with. It's not, I heard this joke today and I tell you a joke, but it's just stupid little things, observational things that end up people, you know, people laugh at. And it's probably the same when audiences are watching like their favorite TV show, a comedy show. You laugh at things because it's relatable. You know, the boss who's annoying, the best friend who always messes up, you know, all those kind of things, you know. Choose a career based on the people you will work with rather than what you're doing. Everyone's always going to say, you should do this, you should do that. No, this is wrong, that's wrong. There's always going to be people who are going to tell you what not to do or what path not to follow. You figure out your own path. In this day and age, you can do anything you want.